People are popping on. So we'll give it a minute for people to jump in, and then Stewie, you can kind of take us through all of your wines.
Sure. So obviously the two we're going to look at tonight would be the 4 Men and a Dog wines, starting with the Shiraz Cabernet, and then we can have a bit of a chat about the Cab Merlot and see where it takes us. How's that sound?
Lovely. How's the weather down in South Australia?
We just had the first nice weekend. So traditionally in the Barossa, you go looking for the first weekend in spring. Now, spring is on a calendar, but spring is also basically in the air. Hang on, just let me turn this off. When you go looking for that first nice weekend in spring, you're just looking for a couple of days where the sun shines, because you've had 12, 13 weeks of winter. It's been pretty cold down here, but good news down here is that we've had a reasonable winter rainfall, and it's probably been wetter for winter than we've seen since 2016, which is great because obviously, you know, ultimately we're all farmers. So with really good winter rainfall, the sun poked its head out last weekend, which is just about perfect for the timing of bud burst. So grapes are getting ready to wake up, you know, like roses. They sit dormant over winter. You go out in winter, you prune them, and then eventually you get enough sun on them in sort of August, September that they start to wake up. And there's the start of the whole growth cycle that's going to take us up to next year's 2022 vintage for all the angels.
Yeah, cool.
Ooh, fabulous.
Stewie, where are you, just for everyone's benefit? Where's home? Where are you right now?
Where's home? The beautiful village of Angaston up in the Eden Valley, just sitting slightly elevated, and as we like to say, looking down on the Barossa.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, before we get started, welcome all of our wonderful Naked Wines angels. We're so happy to have you guys here. Feel free to pop any questions that you have for Stewie or Johan into the chat, and so we can kind of keep the night flowing, pouring some beautiful wines, enjoying all things Stewie has to tell us and teach us about his wine. So, you know, let's get it started. Stewie, tell us, you know, a little bit about you, your background, how'd you get into winemaking, and then would love to hear about your labels, 4 Men in a Shed and 4 Men and a Dog.
Sure. Well, for me, the winemaking escapade started life after school as a scientist. Always been a scientist. Always loved science. Did a lot of that at high school, went to university and did actually a anatomy, pharmacology and histology degree. So basically medical sciences. I thought I was going to find a cure for cancer. I thought I was going to be a great pharmacologist. I thought I was going to discover all these magic pharmaceuticals that would rock the world. And this was back in the late 80s. So obviously everybody had a mullet, everybody, or, you know, the girls all had big hair. Everyone had fabulous glasses. The fashion, you've never seen it ever like the 80s. You know, for those angels out there that lived through the 80s, you know what I'm talking about. So I came out of a science degree thinking that was all going to be great. And it really didn't sort of work out. And a mate of mine was a winemaker, and my mum and dad were grape growers up in the beautiful Clare Valley. So I'd sort of seen grape growing at the start of the process, and I'd seen a lot of hospitality, because you know what it's like when you're a uni student. You pay your way through uni by pretty much, you know, bumping tables, pouring beers, you know, cleaning bars, doing all that sort of stuff. So I'd seen hospitality, which is obviously that's the end of the line. That's where the consumer gets the wine. I'd seen the grape growing at the start of it. And a buddy of mine was a winemaker, and he said, look, you know, if you ever wanted to do a job where every single facet of science was included in your day-to-day living, then this is the gig, right? Winemaking. I said, how's it work? And he said, well, think about it. Microbiology, biochemistry, genetics, physics, hydraulics, engineering, hydrology, geology, and he just listed off every science that you could ever think of. And as a grape grower and a winemaker, there's actually elements of every single facet of science in your day-to-day job. So it sort of ticked all the boxes for me. It was pretty obvious that I was going to be a winemaker. So here we are, 20-something vintages down the track, and still learning every day and still loving it. So that's sort of like a little bit of the backstory. I've had a chance to make wine in Western Australia, in Victoria, South Australia, through the Clare Valley, and the last 20 vintages in the Barossa. So I'm almost local, almost.
Yeah. I mean, to me, Stu, it's funny to hear you talk about that science nerd almost facet when I know your people skills are like up here, right? You're, particularly in the Barossa where mateship is such a big thing in hospitality, and, being amongst it and that emotional connection, which is, if you combine that with the science, and, that's when you get that magic, I think.
Oh, look, Johan, you're spot on. And I think where I got really very lucky and very blessed was that as a science lover, as a scientist, you can sometimes sort of like bury yourself in a laboratory some days and become a little bit insular and a little bit nerdy. But there's nothing better for anyone on the planet than to go out and do hospitality and to work in a bar, work in a restaurant, bump some tables, pour some beers, meet some people, and figure out that the world has got some incredible variation in the population, and also just to learn some people skills. So I think I was really lucky that I could mix science with a hospitality background and really get a good understanding of people and people as consumers. So yeah, I was pretty lucky in that respect. And if I look back at my hospitality career as a uni student, because with 2 degrees, because I did winemaking after I did pharmacology, 9 years at uni, and my parents would just, scratch their head and moan and say, my God, man, one day you've got to get out of this and you've got to get a real job. And of course, I had a HECS bill that looked like the national debt of Bangladesh by the time I'd finished, 2 degrees. But sort of, came out with this wonderful background. And if I look at the places I worked at, like literally, I worked everything from silver service, fine dining, bow tie, the real high-end town, right down to literally, I worked strip bars and some pretty seedy joints as well. So I really got to see, if the world is just the bell curve, I got to spend a lot of time at both ends. Yeah.
And listen, I'm sorry, Dan, and I know Stu and I can talk about the Barossa for a long time, and I know we're not only going to stay in Barossa with Foreman in a Shed tonight, but personally, and I'm not saying this, it is my favorite wine region in Australia, and that the wines are outstanding. That's one part of it, but I think the Barossa, for the sense of community, is pretty unique in the Australian wine landscape. And Stu, you've been amongst that for 20 years now, and just touch a little bit on it, because it's not a given in a wine region where I guess producers compete against each other with their brands and their knowledge, etc., that people so willingly share like they do in the Barossa.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. So, probably just to go back from that, one thing that a lot of people sometimes, I think, just don't have in the front of their mind when they have a glass of wine is that ultimately wine wasn't grown in a city. Wine was grown out in a regional environment. It was grown out in the countryside. So all of us as grape growers, winemakers, and the like, we don't live in cities. We live in little country towns. We live out in regional Australia. And if you go and spend some time in regional Australia, like some of the small towns that this country has as tourist destinations are just incredible for how did the towns come into being? What started them? Why did people build these settlements other than just the cities? And then if you look at the Barossa as an example of, And proudly, this is the time now as a South Australian, I need to remind everyone around Australia, no convicts in South Australia. Right, we will constantly remind you that if you look at the European history of Australia, when the Europeans first came out here and started down the eastern seaboard and started down the western seaboard, obviously penal colonies were pretty much the norm. South Australia hadn't been found. It was kind of like in the middle and down the bottom, and it had been probably overlooked. And it wasn't until Matty Flinders, when he circumnavigated Australia, found South Australia from the sea. And Charles Sturt, how's this for a journey as a sideline? Sturt got in a whaling boat on the top of the Murray River and answered the question of where the hell does this river go? So him and a bunch of mates are in a whaling boat in the 1800s, and the buggers they've rowed all the way down the Murray, and they've got to Lake Alexandrina and the Murray Mouth, and they've said, oh, well, that's okay, that's where the river goes. 30 days to row down, 40 days to row back to report. They'd found South Australia. So in the 1830s, they started coming out here to South Australia, and it was built on migration. It was built on migration of people that wanted to get out. A lot of them were fleeing persecution. So the story then for the Barossa is we were settled by Lutherans back in the 1840s, most of whom were fleeing persecution back in Silesia or Prussia at the time. It sort of morphed into Poland and Germany eventually. And they came out here seeking refuge from religious persecution in a free land. So they came out, no chains, took up some land, and they farmed the land. So that culture, that very rich culture and history that the Barossa's got of this Germanic Lutheran descent, still today is so much of the DNA of the Barossa. I mean, it's not that we're trapped back in time, but some days you feel that it's actually not a bad thing that we are a little bit trapped back in time, but the sense of community. So as an example, you go to some wine regions in Europe where literally the next door neighbours hate each other with a passion because they're competitors. You go to the Barossa and the first thing you notice is that we're all mates, we're all friends. And, you know, if the shit ever hits the fan, your tractor breaks, your truck breaks, you're short of staff for the day, you need a hand, you need to borrow a forklift, a piece of machinery's crapped out. You only have to phone your neighbour in the Barossa and they'll be the first one to come over with a bottle of wine and whatever you need, and probably hang around for the day and help you out. And that sense of community that you get in the Barossa, and you've seen it, Johan, firsthand, that we never see ourselves as competitors. We only ever see ourselves as community members. You know, all our kids go to school together, other than Saturdays when it's country footy, country netball, or country cricket, where we honestly, genuinely hate each other, which is fair. It's, you know, it's regional sport. But short of that, Monday to Friday and on Sundays too, we're all just mates. And the Barossa's landscape is built on a real community. And if any of the angels have ever had a chance to come here, and if you haven't, shame on you, you need to get to the Barossa, you know, one day when we can all travel again. It is really, it's an incredible sense of community that we're all there for each other, and we're always sharing wine with each other. Like even today, you know, today's Thursday, we had 2 other winemakers come round for lunch. We just had some pizza in the winery. They brought around a couple of experimental bottles they're working on. We showed them some stuff we're working on, and we critically looked at each other's work, and no offence taken and lots of praise given, we share stories, we share, because we share this drive that is state first, South Australia, region second, it's the Barossa, brand third, no one's bigger than the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely.
By the way, I don't mind the sound of my own voice. So I'm more than happy to just keep talking.
Hey, we're here for it. I'm waiting for questions to come in, and no one's really asked anything besides somebody asked about they're interested. They recently took a course for professional sommelier and interested in continuing to get involved in the industry, what do you recommend? They go for a uni degree, or are there other courses they can take?
Well, okay, so if they've started off doing some of the early sommelier training, I'm assuming that it could be along the lines of the WSET courses, level 1, level 2, level 3, where level 1 is just basic introduction to wine. Level 2, it's starting to get a little bit more complex and intricate. Level 3, you're really starting to dive deep into wine production styles, varieties. And level 4, you're heading towards that point where you're looking at literally becoming on the path to a master sommelier. So if hospitality and sommelier is your passion, the WSET courses are magnificent. And I would really point you down that pathway, because you can also work and study at the same time. If production is more what tickles your fancy, like you want to be a viticulturalist, you want to grow grapes, or you want to be a winemaker, you want to make wine, there's a raft of TAFE courses that start off, and then eventually, if you want, you can take the leap and go to Charles Sturt University, or like me, Adelaide University, rated in the top 150 universities of the whole planet again and again for pretty much everything. Thanks, Adelaide Uni. There's your big plug. A university degree is, obviously a very high degree of education. But I think the best thing you can do to start with is taste a lot of wine.
Love that.
Go to the local bottle shop. The local bottle shops running tastings. Go, buy wine on Naked Wines. Look at the cross section of wine you can get as an angel. 60 different producers covering the length and breadth of Australia and New Zealand, all the varieties, all the styles, it is the one-stop shop. And in terms of value, no one's going to beat you. So taste a lot of wine, and that really will help you to figure out, is this really going to be my jam? Do I want to be a consumer? Do I want to be an educated consumer? Or do I want to take the next step and become a professional within the industry? Look, whoever out there is looking at it, get them to get hold of us, and we can have a little private chat, and I can give them all sorts of alternatives for career pathways. Because it's a big industry. It's not just about someone makes it, someone sells it. There's all these other things: cartons, labels, glass, capsules, screw caps, corks, oak barrels, yeast, all sorts of stuff. It's a pretty complex industry.
I think it's about the perfect time to crack open a bottle of your wines. Which bottle are we starting out with tonight?
Okay, so enough on that. Let's now crack on with 4 Men and a Dog. Right, 4 Men and a Dog, because for the Angels this month, the Shiraz Cabernet from 4 Men and a Dog is in your basket. It's one of the free bottles. All you got to do is check out with a purchase, and it's coming your way. So very briefly, before I dive into the wine, other than here, 4 men in a shed, me and 3 mates, literally in a shed making wine in the Barossa. That's us. That's who we are in the Naked Wine space. We are 4 men and a shed. And if you ever wanted to see simplistic branding and simplistic beliefs, it's pretty easy. It's 4 men and it's in a shed. Right? This is the genius of marketing when you leave boys in charge, right? Because we are pretty simple creatures. 4 Men in a Shed was born out of literally me and the other 3. We've known each other for years. We're all really good mates. We met each other in corporate winemaking years ago. We worked for a larger company. We all looked at each other quite often and just went, not only, are you all particularly good looking folk, but maybe one day we should have our own gig, and we should get out of this big space, get out of this corporate space, and just get a little old shed and just, tinker on the tools. So that's what we are, just 4 blokes in a shed tinkering on the tools. But also we've gone back that whole to where we used to be. When we were young, we made wine with our hands. As we went up corporate ladders, you do less with your hands and more with your fingers typing, and you do more with computers and you do less on the tools. And you get up there one day and you look down and you just think, I'm losing all these skills. So at that time, we all bailed, the shed's been put together, and we've just gone back to basics. 4 men and a shed on the tools. So everything's, okay, we don't grow grapes. That's the next thing. So everyone says, well, how the hell do you make wine if you don't grow grapes? Growers. We have the most beautiful grower base of these old 3rd, 4th, 5th, even now 6th generation Barossa old Lutheran families that grow grapes. This is part of the old Barossa landscape, and we buy grapes from old farming families, and that's how we get our grapes to make our wine. So it's all about that whole, a bit like you guys at Naked, support your local producer. For us, it's support your local producer. We make wine from locals' grapes. We support local farmers. We buy their produce, grapes, and we make wine. So that was very much the Barossa side of things, 4 men in a shed, and we've been doing that for a while. So obviously South Australia is a pretty big landscape when it comes to agriculture, and viticulture is one of them. And we like road trips, and we've got a dog and we've got a ute, and we like getting in the ute with the dog and going on road trips. So 4 men in a shed was always going to be that very much Barossa-centric part of us with you guys at Naked Wines, whereas 4 men and a dog was the obvious, and again, this is genius branding, you know, put the dog in the ute, go for a drive. What can you come up with? 4 men and a dog. Because 4 men, a dog in a ute is starting to become a little bit too unwieldy as a brand name. So we've been going on road trips for the last few years, and we met some really beautiful people down in Langhorne Creek. Now, if you ever want to see a grossly underrated wine region in terms of bang for your buck, it's Langhorne Creek. They grow amazing quality fruit, but because some days the perception in the marketplace, perception of consumers is, oh, you know, it's Langhorne Creek. Okay, yeah. But what you can get for your dollar at a Langhorne Creek in terms of great prices and wine quality and fruit and the like is just exceptional. I mean, even if you look back at the history of the Australian wine industry, how many times has Langhorne Creek or a Langhorne Creek blend popped up in things like the Jimmy Watson Wine Awards and all sorts of other things? It's an amazing place. It's an old alluvial floodplain, so it's quite fertile, and it's just down past Strathalbyn, sort of southeast of Adelaide. It's not a big drive, and it's really starting to hit its straps. Like, there's some pretty cool things happening down in Langhorne Creek. One of my buddies I went to agricultural college with years ago, he's an artisanal sourdough baker down at Langhorne Creek, and this guy rocks. If you ever see Small World Bakery, pretty much it's all South Australian, but if you ever see it, it's just exceptional. And so he's on the tools making bread down there. They're growing really good grapes and making wine. They're mucking around in the craft beer spaces. They're in artisanal spirits a whole bit. Like, you know, happy days in South Australia. Langhorne Creek's a winner. So me and the boys and the dog and the ute meet up with some folks. We made some wine a couple of years ago, and let's be real, with this whole Stop the Squeeze campaign, we thought what we were doing would end up in China. And obviously, we all know what happened last year with trade tariffs and barriers and, you know, all that sort of stuff, which was, you know, and this is all stuff out of our control. This is all stuff that happens at a very high federal level between countries. But obviously the fallout then trickles down and eventually ends up hitting farmers. You know, once again, farmers wear the brunt. So the wine that we'd made, which we knew was exceptional, where, you know, we'd been experimenting outside of the Barossa, we'd been playing with all sorts of things, and that wine was almost without a home. And then along came you guys, and we showed it to you, and that whole Stop the Squeeze program that you put together to help people like me and the boys and the dog, and all these other beautiful winemakers you've got in Naked Wines, wines that we've made for other markets that weren't going to happen, and along come the angels and help us out. Like, I love you all. So 4 Men and a Dog, Shiraz Cabernet. It's pretty simple. Pick the fruit, crush it and open ferment it, very traditional, don't do a lot, a little bit of yeast, sugar turns to alcohol, 8 or 9 days on skins, just gently plunge it, get a bit of colour out of it, put it in a press, squeeze out the juice, keep some of it in stainless steel because that keeps it fresh, and then you're going to blend that in with the stuff that's going to go to barrel, and then after a bit of time in barrel and a bit of time in steel, you put it together. And then you let the Shiraz meet the Cabernet. And again, this wine, it's 1 glass of red wine. But if you looked at the componentry that went into it, it's a pretty amazing jigsaw puzzle. And I think that's a really good analogy for all the angels is every time you get a blend, think that it's just a puzzle. A winemaker sat there with a whole bunch of pieces and literally put a puzzle together, a jigsaw puzzle. And that's what the Shiraz Cabernet is. Shiraz I love because it's really spicy. It's that lovely richness up front, but this is Langhorne Creek. It's not going to be aggressive. It's going to be very soft. So big in the middle, soft at the end. And this is where the Cabernet comes and meets the Shiraz, and the Cabernet builds in your mouth. So it's not as much up front. It's more at the tail end in your mouth. So the Shiraz is going to welcome you, and the Cabernet is going to see you out the door. And the two of them are going to play together very beautifully. And look at the history of winemaking in Australia. I always remember my pop and my dad would share claret together. Have a glass of claret, they'd say. Right, what were the clarets? Most of the clarets in Australia back then for the baby boomers and the post-waries it was Shiraz Cabernet blends. And I think this is just, if anything, then this is just a hark back to the days where just a lovely glass of soft, rich claret was exactly what you needed at the end of the day with a meal. So that's us. That's 4 Men and a Dog. That's Shiraz Cabernet. And then again, there's me just continuing to monopolise the conversation.
Amazing. And what kind of dog is the dog?
What is the dog? Okay, Willow. Willow is the dog. Willow is a she, because I think if you've got 4 blokes loose in a shed, you should have at least a little bit of female supervision. So the dog is very good at keeping us all in check. Willow she's actually a rescue dog. So her, within the 4 of us, Florian is the dog's owner, and Florian and his wife are part of a animal rescue group. So in particular, farm rescues for dogs. So it sounds a bit rough, but in the old days, very, very old days, if a dog was no good on a farm, and it was no good with sheep or cattle or around horses, it was no good with stock, it would probably meet a fairly quick end, and that was just the end of it, and you get another dog, because dogs in that sort of situation are working dogs. They're an employee. They're not just a pet. We live in more enlightened days now, thank goodness. And there's groups around Australia who take these dogs from farms that aren't, they're not superstars. They're not really good in a sheep yard. They're not really good in a cattle yard. They get spooked by horses or whatever the issue is. But they're still beautiful dogs. But they're in the wrong spot. They shouldn't be on a farm. They should be in a loving home. So these groups of people now get these farm rescue dogs, and what Florian and his wife do is they're kind of like the adoption house. They get the dog straight from the farm, and they're trained animal handlers. They're beautiful people, and they assess the dog over time to see, would the dog suit rehoming with a family, maybe with house and a backyard and a few kids, whatever. And Willow came to them a few years ago as a farm rescue. She's got Labrador, black Labrador. She's got Healer, and she's got Kelpie. So she's got, it's weird, she's kind of like got Kelpie ears rather than Labrador ears. So she looks a little bit like Yoda. She's got this very Labrador head, and she's got a little bit of speckling at the front from the Healer. So she, you know, like this wine, she's a bloody good blend, the dog, you know, not a purebred. She came, and she's the foster fail. She came to the foster home, and we got rid of her. We just fell in love with her, so she stayed. So that's Willow. So every now and again you'll see her pop up in our socials with a picture of this gorgeous black Labrador cross with Yoda's ears. That's Willow, and she just makes our life so much better at work. You know, recently you had Take Your Dog to Work Day. Every day should be Take Your Dog to Work Day.
I love that.
So yeah, so that's the dog.
What would you pair with? What foods would you pair with this wine?
Okay. Shiraz Cabernet blends, the old-fashioned claret blends, which, so let's think, they're rich, but they're soft. So they're actually not going to kill a lot of food. So you can go down the elegance spectrum in food. It's not like the old classic big bottle of Shiraz needs a big piece of dead animal flesh or a big spicy massacre for the vegetarian option. And these Shiraz Cabernets go really, classic is today, pizza. Glass of wine at lunch with some pizza. Steak sandwiches. Pasta sauces that have got tomato, because the acid from the tomato and the flavour will sit nicely with a wine like this. We did an old-fashioned duck breast ragu the other day, you know, just because we were bored. You know, oh, here's some duck breast, let's ragu it. And with just some hand-cut wide ribbon pappardelle. It was awesome. We've served it with a mushroom risotto before, and it'll hold that. These kind of styles are really, they'll sit with so much. And if you're a cheese lover, which we are, you don't need a really stinky cheese, but maybe something with just a little bit of bite, an aged cheddar. But in saying that, we've also served them up with triple cream bries, and they go all right. It's a pretty versatile wine. You're going to struggle to find anything on your table that it won't sit with, if that makes sense. And there's a few little menu options, because you know that we're all frustrated foodies. We're all just frustrated chefs trapped in the body of a winemaker.
Yeah, I think that's quite obvious, Stewie. You told me about having to rush off to cook lunch the other day when we had a bit of a chat on the phone. And your voice were getting a bit cranky because lunch was going to be late.
12:30. If the lunch isn't on the table at the winery, I'll be hearing about it. Yeah.
What's the percentage of Shiraz versus Cab in this wine?
It's very close to half, because where we've looked at, and we'll get to the Cab Merlot and the Tick, which is a little bit more dominant by one and more submissive by the other variety. But for these Shiraz Cabernets, literally, when we looked at the blend percentages, anywhere around close to half, because you don't really want the Shiraz to stand out and the Cabernet plays second fiddle. Vice versa, you don't want the Cabernet to stand out and the poor old Shiraz to be sitting in the background. I mean, these two play so beautifully together that you really want to see both. So, and given that Shiraz is really sitting up the front of the mouth and the Cabernet is more towards the back of the mouth, by having almost sort of equal proportions, you get to see a bit of both in them. And again, when I looked at these components prior to blending, the Shiraz was lovely. You know, you drink it by itself. Same for the Cab. But then there's that magical, when they come together, that the sum of the components is so much better than just the equal parts by themselves, if that makes sense. Great analogy the other day, one of my mates says is, you go into a pub, you order a schnitty, you get yourself a schnitzel. Great. But it's not really great unless it's a schnitty, chips and salad, right? That's what you're looking for. So, the Shiraz by itself is lovely, but with the Cabernet, you go from just a schnitty to a schnitty, chips and salad.
Fabulous.
Is there any questions? I keep talking, by the way. Has anyone been asking anything and I just keep,
Yeah, we just love hearing all about the wine. And do you have any serving recommendations? Like, does this need to open up a little bit?
It's funny you mention that, because with all of the, and this is again, things we love about Naked Wines, I communicate directly with people that drink the wine. And I'm starting to see names turn up again and again, as some of these beautiful angels who've supported us over the years. You just see the name coming. Oh, great, there they are again. The feedback mechanism that you guys have created for directly communicating with a winemaker, there's no one else doing that. And this is, when you say to people, benefits of being an angel, go down the bottle shop, buy a bottle of wine and see how you go trying to communicate with the person that make it. No, not going to happen. Buy wine through here and it gives you that direct line to the person that made it. Not a robot, it's a person. Right? You communicate with a person. So on that, some of the feedback I get about serving for reds, I often tend to reply with just a nice, easy blanket statement. All good red wine deserves a chance. So if it's sitting there all cramped up in its little bottle, there it is, it's been sitting in there waiting for someone to come along and give it some love. Rather than just rip the top off and go, and I know that some days, we're a bit of an immediate kind of society. We like to do that. How about prep it up? Someone put some love into that bottle. So let's give it just a little bit of respect. And then, I've got a history of smashing incredibly expensive decanters, just an absolute putz. Right? You buy a beautiful decanter, don't bring me to dinner because I'll break it. Not deliberately, but I'm going to break it. So decanting, the art of decanting, it's actually not an art. It is absolutely simple. I've got an old plastic beer jug. I get a bottle of wine. I take the lid off and I just pour from a height into the beer jug. Splash, splash, splash. Let it splash around. Right. Decant it just in case there's a little bit of sediment in the red. Don't be afraid if there's sediment in the red. It's okay. It's natural. It does happen with some wines. Right. Decant. Rinse the bottle out with some fresh water, and then from the beer jug back into the bottle. Because the other thing is, I like serving wine at the table in the bottle that the winemaker put it in. If you serve it in a decanter, these beautiful pieces of glass, that's wonderful. Again, I'll smash it for you, don't worry. But then there's no label on it. Then it's almost become, like without an identity. Like we put wine in bottles and then we put nice labels on them for you to sort of see who we are and feel who we are before you taste who we are. So that double decant splash back into the bottle. I dare any angel to go down the street and buy a cheap bottle of red wine, or even better, buy a really good value bottle of red wine from this site. Get two, put them side by side, do the double decant on one, rip the top and just pour the other one. And I'll bet you that double decanted red wine will be a much more enjoyable glass of wine than straight out of the bottle. All good red wine, doesn't matter the price, doesn't matter where it came from, doesn't matter what variety it is. All good red wine deserves a chance to breathe and open up and really show you what it can do. A bit like minestrone soup. Sometimes it's even better the next day. Right? If you don't finish the bottle, Not that that really ever happens in this house, but, you know, I've heard it does happen. You go back the next day and it's had that little chance to breathe. And again, it's just that little bit more open. It's a very natural set of oxidative reactions where a little bit of air gets in and opens up your wine. So from a chemical perspective, there is real science to this. But angels don't need to know that. All they need to know is how to do it. And the fact that if you do that, you're going to get a nicer experience. So our serving suggestion is the same as any of the wines you would buy through you guys. If it's red, let it breathe. It's just going to be a nicer experience, and it's also starting to prep you up to receive that wine. You're sitting there, you smells coming out of the jug and smells coming out of the bottle, and yeah, there you go. Another wonderful long-winded answer from S. Bourne.
Lovely. Well, yeah, you do it well. I usually just pour it in my glass while I'm cooking dinner and let it breathe and open up, and then.
I mean, there's also the occasional white wine style, some of the heavier whites that also just that little bit of air can really help with them. But obviously, whites don't have the inbuilt protective mechanism of red wine pigments, tannins, and colour. So reds are much more resilient and robust to the receiving of a little bit of a splash, whereas, you know, a Riesling, oh no, I'd never decant a Riesling. It's very much kid gloves and gently pour it chilled into a glass because it's such a delicate creature. It won't cope with a lot of air. But, you know, when in doubt, if it's red, let it breathe. Guaranteed it's going to help.
Love that.
How are we doing with that Shiraz Cabernet, which appears to...
People are loving it. Yeah, we have people that have been opening it up, and some people just kind of cracked it open and drank right away. So great reviews. Would love to hear about your second wine before we run out of time.
Yeah, exactly. So let's be masters of our own destiny, and we'll deal with Four Men in a Shed Cabernet Merlot. Right. Cabernet and Merlot have been playing together very, very well. You know, these two they've been really good friends. I wouldn't say they're the bestest of friends like Shiraz and Cabernet have been, but you know, Cab and Merlot, they're almost besties. They've been hanging out together for a long time. And what's the whole goal here with the Cab Merlot? Because the Shiraz Cabernet was you're looking at pretty much equal parts, let them play together. Cab Merlot is more about a splash of Merlot to soften the Cabernet spine. So let's look at those two varieties. Cabernet Sauvignon by itself, quite a robust creature, tends to be, no matter where it grows, you know, Margaret River, Langhorne Creek, Clare Valley, McLaren Vale, Barossa, Adelaide Plains, Bendigo, Orange, wherever it grows, Cabernet tends to be quite a robust creature. Merlot, no matter where it grows, tends to be a bit more of a softer creature. You know, whereas Cabernet's got these muscles on it, and it's quite, you know, not in your face, but it's going to give you a bit of a rub up. Merlot is just this very gentle, demure creature who's very intelligent, articulate, but sits in the background and is just that lovely softening agent. So when we do this as the Cab Merlot blend, all you're looking at is really just tipping in enough Merlot into the Cabernet to soften it up, just to take that hard edge off the back of it. So you end up being quite Cabernet dominant, with a really good big splash of Merlot. And when I looked at these two components early up, the Merlot was just this beautiful, plummy, soft, squishy, sort of like, you know, big bowl of strawberries and a few squishy plums. And the Cabernet really was quite firm. And again, this is Langhorne Creek, I think, again, at its absolute best. Big Cab, soft Merlot, let them play together. A little bit of time, you know, these are 2019 wines. They're coming up towards being 3 years old. They've had a chance to sit in barrel, sit in tank, sit in bottle now. So if you're a Cabernet fan, I reckon you go well with Cab Merlot. But if you like a softer side to red wine, then it should be a safe option where it's not going to be as a straight Cabernet. So if you're an angel starting your journey into red wine, Grenache, Pinot, some soft reds, and you start thinking, okay, cool, let's step it up a few notches. A Cab Merlot is going to be a pretty safe option in the medium to full bodied space. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's gonna carry really rich food, but it's also not going to kill delicate food. If you did a crispy squid salad with a heap of vinegar and chili, you might be thinking, oh, straight away I'd default to a rosé or a white wine. This wine would probably carry it. But if you were just literally doing that whole, old-fashioned Greek moussaka for the vegetarian option that just had lots of salt and lots of pepper and lots of chili and really big flavors, it'll carry it. And if you're a carnivore, well, something red, about an inch cut, and just seal it both sides, finish it in the oven slow, and just let a knife fall through it. Yeah, it's going to carry it. Again, that's what I love about these two wines, is they're pretty versatile. They're going to be friendly on a table. And if you're an angel and you wanted to take a bottle to a party or a friend's dinner or whatever, and you're thinking, these are risk-free wines. They're not going to offend. Okay, they're not at the absolute top end of town. They're not these stunning revelations where you pay lots of dollars for lots of, these are just great value. Take them to a party, put them on the table with pride, and watch a few people go, dang, don't mind that one.
No, but I think going back to Langhorne Creek as well there, Stewie, I mean, it is so underrated. And obviously you guys are, really incredible winemakers. So to get access to that fruit, that is underrated and probably a lot less than it would be in the Barossa or McLaren Vale for the same
very
quality.
Much. And that shows in, the price that we can sell these wine to angels for is not reflective of the labour of love of the winemaking. They're still as expensive to make as a great Barossa Shiraz or a reserve style Cabernet from the Barossa. It takes the same amount of love and attention to make the wines, but the big difference at the end outcome at the cash register, like you just said, is driven by the fruit price. You can buy Langhorne Creek fruit for less dollars per tonne than if you were buying Barossa grapes. And that's really where the difference in price point comes from. And in a blind tasting, we've put these up against a whole bunch of other regions, and they've held their own as being value.
Yeah. And I think it's a perception, right? I've been in the Australian wine industry for 22 years now, and I've never viewed Langhorne as being really a lesser region. I think the industry itself almost created that for themselves. If you look at the old vines that Langhorne has, the history, there's no reason why grapes grown in Langhorne should be lesser than in McLaren Vale.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a marketing thing, right?
Exactly, spot on. It's a long-term marketing where we're very lucky. The Barossa's been able to use its history, its culture, and go out and market itself. And I'll be very proud of the region I live in and say that when it comes to wine regions and recognition by consumers worldwide, the Barossa rates #1 in the country for the recognition of a quality wine region. We've done South Australian Tourism Commission, Australian Tourism Commission. We've done all this research around the world and around the country. The Barossa is just the Barossa. It rates. But for the angels out there, you're not going to drink Barossa every day. I mean, I'd love you to drink Barossa every day. If you have a look at some of the people that we've got in Naked Wines with Tim Smith and with Dolan and Caroline Dunn and Sorby Adams, Ralph, there's some incredible, just within the Naked family, we got the Barossa pretty stitched up. We got some great wine, but you won't drink Barossa every day. Let's be real. You're going to drink other regions. Yeah, Langhorne Creek, it's almost like that surprise packet. You know, the kid that turns up at the party and no one really knows them, and you go and spend some time with them and you come back and everyone says, who's that? And I go, oh, that's Langhorne Creek. You should go and meet them. They're pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one of the reasons as well, obviously, is the big corporates been, you know, they've known this for a long time. And I just want to talk about, you know, what wine being made by Stuey and the three men with Willow looking on, as opposed to, you know, a big corporate backed up by private equity, etc. I know who I'd rather buy wine from, but when it comes to Langhorne, so, you know, Treasury, etc., with the big brands, obviously Wolf Blass in the day knew the value of Langhorne, and they sort of snuffled that up for a lot of years. But it's great to see that, you know, we're getting some access now to, you know, winemakers like yourself going in there and just going, okay, I'm going to get some of this bloody good fruit and do something.
Yeah. I'm going to not take advantage of anyone, but I will, to a degree, take some advantage of the marketing, of pricing of grapes, knowing that we can buy some grapes down there that is going to make wines like this that are going to be ripping value. So the Angels are going to get, you know, so close to the top tier wines of the country by perception, but not paying anywhere near the price. You know, so that whole, and one thing we always got drummed into us at agricultural college was, you know, it's one thing to grow a crop, but the crop has value. And the best thing you can do is go out and look at other crops that are similar. And is the crop you're growing of equitable or better quality, hard to gauge, but value, easy to gauge. Testing out the value. You know, that whole bang for your buck. You want bang for your buck, you go to Langhorne Creek, you're never going to be sad. No, it's just, and again, this is fruit that was made into wine that, you know, almost didn't have a home because of things outside our control and the way that this weird world goes some days. And then you guys come along and we show you these wines and the Angels put their hands up and say, we will support small independents, we will support local farmers, and we will help you all. So that it's this whole movement that I love, and the Angels are leading the pack with this whole think global, but act local. Act local, right? And I think, you know, things that we've all learned as a society, you know, lessons in the last 12 to 18 months, supporting small independent businesses, because if you don't, the way the world's going, there may come a time one day when you won't have those small independents and you'll only be left with the big boys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thought, you know, something I've discovered over the years, and it's becoming quite apparent, right, is that wine that is made in a shed by four blokes in smaller volume and tended to with love is always, regardless of the vintage, going to be better than something made in a 300,000 litre tank in a wine factory. And I think that is something that comes through as well in your wines.
And again, just reading the comments that we get from the Angels and the relationships we're building with them now, because, you know, me and the boys have been with you guys for quite a few years now. I mean, we're not like Jock Harvey and Jen, who were there at the start. And, you know, I mean, look at the wines that they're making that Angels get hold of that others don't get. You know, ridiculous value, great wine. But for us, our journey in Naked has really opened our eyes to the fact that we know that consumers want to feel an attachment. They want to feel a link. They want to feel that genuinely the product they've got goes back to people, place, and the farming folk that create it. And you've given them the ability to make that link, because even today when I was, you know, writing up some responses and answering people's reviews, and again, just being so proud of what me and the boys have done when we see these 4-star, 4.5-star, 5-star reviews and read the Angels' comments, we're seeing that people genuinely want to deal with small independents and act local. So I can't say thanks enough to all those angels out there who really are, you are Naked Wines. You know, you, Johanna, and me, we're just a piece of the puzzle. The real Naked Wines is all the angels out there that support us little independents. That's what makes us all different in a beautiful way.
Yes. Very well said. Before we wrap up, we have 2 questions. So Stuey, challenging you to give us your answer in 4 minutes. What are
4 minutes?
Come on, Stuey, you can do it. What are some of your favorite wine regions outside of South Australia? And quickly tell us about your experience about serving wine to the Queen.
Oh, serving wines to the Queen, that's an easy one. I made a Semillon many, many years ago in the Barossa. It was a Barossa Valley floor Semillon made in a very traditional Germanic style, bone dry, piercingly acidic, picked very early and fresh, only 10% alcohol. The kind of Semillon that I really rate. And Semillon used to be all over the Barossa floor. It's no longer there. It's been pulled out as we put more reds in. But I made this Semillon, and our distributor in the UK, our importer, who's a beautiful, beautiful old chap, had ties to some of the catering firms that would look after royal visits in certain parts of the UK. And he went and took our Semillon and showed it to a panel of people who screen all this stuff, that screen the food and screen the wine and everything that's going to be served to the royal family. And Her Majesty was down at a coastal town in the south of England, and she was launching a new boat for the Royal Navy, and as part of that, there's obviously lots of fanfare, and then and at the luncheon after that, the Semillon from the colonies that we'd made. So as I laughed and I said, "You're serving convict wine?" He said, "Oh no, chap, it's not convict wine. You're South Australians. There are no convicts." So my Semillon sat at a table, and Her Majesty got to taste a little bit of wine that we'd made back home. And again, I don't think it's the only glass of wine that Lizzie's ever had. I think she might have had the odd glass of wine and a little bit of a tipple with Philip over the years. But just for that little point in time, she got to taste a little bit of Barossa magic. So I was pretty rapt about that. It's a pretty big day when I could phone everyone and say, "Oh, mate, I'm meant to be having lunch with the Queen today, but couldn't get there. But at least she's got a glass of our wine." What was the other question? There was 3 minutes.
Yes, you got 1 minute. What about other of your favorite wine regions besides South Australia?
Wine regions or winemakers?
Wine regions.
Wine regions. Okay. Orange is an undiscovered genius of New South Wales. Above that mark, where it comes, and I believe it's the only region in Australia that to qualify for the orange GI, you actually have to be above a certain altitude rather than just a place on a map. Orange is an undiscovered genius. As you head down into Victoria, there's some pockets of Victoria that are outstanding. Bendigo, Ballarat, Ararat, the Golden Triangle. I had a little stint in the Pyrenees there for a while. I was at Blue Pyrenees for a couple of years ago as a very young person, and I got taken with that whole central Victoria. Head down onto the Bellarine Peninsula, Mornington, Geelong, ripping Pinot and Chardonnay. Jump on the ferry, head across to Tassie, go to the Tamar. You want to drink Pinot, you want to drink Chardonnay, and you want to just cry with the natural beauty of one of the most gorgeous parts of the world, go to Tasmania, up the top end around Tamar, and even down the bottom end around Hobart. scooch back into South Australia, and obviously Coonawarra is a special place, that little cigar shape of soil in the middle of paddocks that just produces Cabernet of outstanding bloody quality. Pop back up, Adelaide Hills, Clare, Barossa, McLaren Vale, hello, right, in South Australia, what's it got going for it? Yeah, just a little bit along those lines. But then poke across to Western Australia, the Swan has a lot of heat, the Swan Valley, and makes beautiful fortifieds and other fresh whites, and then head down the Margaret River and across to sort of Denmark, Franklin, Mount Barker, and you'll get some stunning coastal Western Australian wine. So if I've missed anyone on the boat, I do apologise. What are my favourite wine regions? All of them, because they're all so uniquely beautiful and different. And this is the space that we bring to Angels. Where would you like to shop for your wine? Because pretty much, if you can think of it, and it's a beautiful, beautiful part of regional Australia, I reckon we pretty much got you covered.
Absolutely. I don't need to add anything to that, obviously. Well summarized. So I think, that is the beauty about having such a large country as well, right? You get all these beautiful microclimates and an opportunity to grow every grape in the world, and it's going to find somewhere in Australia where it goes pretty well. I'm not going to get started on the Connois. We can talk about that another time. But if you want to plug it, you do have a wine coming up, yeah?
We do. So quick plug on that one. Coonawarra is an old Coonawarra is an old heritage variety that's registered in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. It's one of the, obviously the Châteauneuf classification. You can only grow certain varieties. Coonawarra, I believe nowadays, is less than 2% of the whole of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. So it's not only an old heritage variety, it's obscure, it's almost not obsolete, but it's almost extinct. And we have got a grower who put some in as a small batch trial for us, and they planted Carignan, which is another beautiful old Southern French heritage variety. They planted them together. We field blended them, we picked them together, and we've made something that is not rosé because it's heavier, and it's not big red wine because it's lighter. So if you think Pinot with attitude, something like that, I don't know, hard to describe. It's in clear glass, you'll be able to see straight through it, pop it in the fridge, you give it a light chill, spring's on the way, summer's on the way, and it's only moderate alcohol. So out of the Barossa, where 2/3 of this district is renowned for Shiraz, comes these tiny little experimental patch of Coonawarra and Carignan, and that's coming out pretty soon with you guys, because when I came to you ages ago and said, I've got a grower that's experimenting, you were the first people that put your hand up and said, if it tastes good and it's going to bring value to Angels, we're on board. Here we go. This is the relationship we've got with you guys. You're taking all, Graciano, Montepulciano, all this sort of weird left field stuff we're doing. But that Coonawarra Carignan is out pretty soon. We might even touch on that one later on in October, when there's going to be a whole bunch more Zoom tastings, because us winemakers can't come and see you at the moment, but we can beam into your living room on Tuesdays and Thursdays during October. So that might just poke its head up, and we'll see what everyone thinks.
Perfect. Be perfect for spring as well. It's a really interesting wine. It's like you said, it's actually hard to describe it before you taste it. But if you do feel, if you're a white wine drinker that feel like something heavy, or if you're normally a red wine drinker that feel like something lighter, this is just, but not rosé. It's just,
exactly. You're right. It's not rosé because it's not that salmony pink. You can see straight through it. But it's not red wine where you sort of, you struggle to see through it. It's this really interesting in-betweener. And we tried it the other day with some steak sandwiches, and it did go very well. But next week, I've got the real test of the Coonawarra Carignan. I've got a spicy Asian crispy beef salad, and that'll be the acid test. if it goes well with that, which I'm pretty sure it will, then I'll know that we've done our job. So again, you know, if you're an angel, you can come and buy a Barossa Shiraz. You can buy all these wonderful safe options. You can buy some Langhorne Creek. They're going to be safe as well, and they're going to be interesting wines. But Naked's also bringing you a whole lot of not weird and wacky, but just, you know, off the beaten track stuff. So if you're what I call the classic discoverer, like you want to find something cool, funky, and that the other kids either haven't found or there's not much of it, troll through some of the, don't be a troll. No one likes trolls. Scroll through the Naked Wines offerings and you'll see a few of these little ones turn up. And for us, under 4 Men in a Shed, it'll be under the small batch trial label. And that's going to be our little chance to experiment with you guys and even better, get direct feedback from angels. Do you like it or not?
And I think, I think Naked Wines is the best place to go out there and explore the different types of wines. It may be something that you're not quite sure if you like it or not, because if you don't like it, we'll give you your money back.
If you don't like it, we'll refund your money and we will make it right for you. We will figure out how to make it right if you're not happy, because if you're not happy, we're not happy. Make us happy.
You've given us a lot of one-liners that we need to kind of now go back and take it to the creative team. So I love it. Well, I want to say huge thank you to all the angels that have joined us. Of course, Stuey, I could sit here all night and hear all of the amazing stories between you and Johan, but we'll give everybody else their evening, and hopefully everybody enjoyed having some wine and hearing from Stuey.
Yeah, and again, if anyone's got questions, if anyone's got feedback, here's the beauty. It doesn't stop then. You go to the page for 4 Men in a Shed and for me, and you just put stuff up, and within a few days, guaranteed, I'll come back and we can just chat and engage. This is what our promise to you is. We engage with you directly. Find me someone else that does, you're going to struggle.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Stu. That was awesome. Good session.
Beautiful. Thanks heaps.
I've popped Stuey's profile in the chat. If you guys make sure you're following him along, because you'll get updates on what he's doing in the shed, and hopefully some photos of Willow. Yeah,
I think she's going to end up being the superstar. Me and the other boys, we got. Someone said to us the other day, we all had really good heads for radio, but the dog was beautiful. So
there you go.
Awesome.
Thanks heaps, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Cheers. All right. Great work. Jumping off. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks heaps, guys, for letting me be a part of this. You know how we feel about all of you lot. Hopefully it comes through.
Oh, absolutely. It's really good fun, yeah. And I look forward to seeing some of those samples.
Yeah, no, they're on the way, and I'm just looking up at the time now. So there's 1 hour and 7 minutes, and I only got told to shut up twice. So that's pretty good.
Oh, we won't make you shut up, but yeah, you guys definitely, working for Naked Wines, the winemakers, is what drives me every day to work really hard and keep growing, because I truly believe in what you guys are doing, and just love. I mean, I not only do I love drinking your wines, but I love just connecting with you guys and hearing about how you gotten into winemaking and learning a lot more about wine than I ever thought I would ever get to know.
But again, this is what we've got with this business and with these people. This is what we've got, is the ability to touch every single piece of the business, which is the consumer, our beautiful angels, the producer, which is us, you guys in the middle. All those touch points mean it's not that soulless journey into a bottle shop where you just grab a bottle and walk. This is genuinely, you're going into a virtual bottle shop, but no one else gives you the ability to actually touch the producer, and for me, to touch the consumer.
No.
You're the only ones doing that. And this is why we are so different. And it's also why we're becoming more and more successful in a world where consumers want to touch.
Absolutely. No. All right, I'm going to go and say goodnight to my kids. Great to see you.
I'm going to go do the dishes, and I've got to get my sourdough starter culture going tonight because tomorrow's baking day.
Yeah. You got your priorities right. I love it.
Yep.
Thanks,
love your work, guys. See yous.
Yeah.